for us. So as an MEP, I was proud to be part of the cross-party effort which we took to the European Court of Justice with David Martin and Catherine Styler for the Labour Party, my SNP colleague Joanna Cherry at Westminster, and the Greens, Ross Greer and Andy Whiteman. Goodness, Brexit really is confusing me. And the six of us worked together, hand in glove, to take the UK government to court to gain the black and white legal judgment from the European Court of Justice in the teeth of opposition from the UK government, that it is open to the UK to revoke Article 50 at any time. Mrs May triggered Article 50 by writing a letter. It can be revoked by writing a letter as well. The Westminster parties have collapsed into chaos. There are a lot of my friends in the Labour Party, a lot of my friends in the Conservative Party who are appalled at what is going on. I share that. Happily, my party is united and clear that there's no good Brexit, and we need to revoke Article 50 now. We are also open to a second referendum on the European question, and that's what we'll be discussing tonight, and I very much look forward to your questions and your comments. Thanks for being here.
And our second speaker is Neil Benny. Can I just stress, I'm sure Neil will as well, but Neil is not standing in the election, but he's here representing the Conservative and Unionist Party.
Thank you for that introduction, Dan, and thank you for organising this. I think any event where we get people together to talk about the great issues of the day is an event which is worth having, and it is always vital to ensure that all voices are represented and heard, and that's why I'm here tonight. I don't want to be here tonight. For many, many reasons, I do not want to be here tonight. It is a beautiful day. The sun is shining. I would much rather be sitting in my garden, having a nice cold drink in this sun, as I'm sure many of us would be as well. The thing is, the law requires us to hold these European elections on this month, in a couple of weeks' time. I am not standing for the European Parliament. I'm a local councillor here. You're in my ward. Anyone who enjoys this part of Stirling or is from this part of Stirling may have seen me around. But the thing is here, why am I here today speaking on behalf of the Scottish Conservative Party? And it is because the Scottish Conservative Party is a party which believes in a pragmatic solution here. We are the only party which is in a position to deliver on Brexit. And I know many of the people in the room here today will not want to deliver Brexit. I know Alan's already said there about revoking Article 50. Yes, Article 50 can be revoked. The question I would ask is, should Article 50 be revoked? And the answer I would give you is no, it should not be revoked. And the primary reason it should not be revoked is because we have to respect the result of the referendum which was held in 2016. And we have to respect the results of referendums. In 2014, we had a referendum to decide whether we would stay in or leave the United Kingdom. We decided to stay in the United Kingdom. And then in 2016, we had a referendum as a United Kingdom to decide whether we would stay in or leave the European Union. And we voted to leave the European Union. Now, whether you voted for that or not, it's important that the parties work together to make the best of that instruction. An instruction it was. And I think what the Prime Minister is doing and what our leaders in Westminster are doing is to pull together a pragmatic Brexit. Now, there are very many people in all parties, and my own party is not innocent of this, who are playing politics with this issue, who are using this issue to further their own ambitions and their own ends. Now, I think that it is time for us to pull together as a country and to actually deliver on Brexit. The reasons I'm a Conservative, I believe in freedom of opportunity, and I believe in a strong economy, and I believe in an ordered society. And these are things which I think are worth standing up for, and that is why I'm standing here today. None of our European candidates could make it tonight, and they're very sorry for that. They asked me to pass on their apologies, but I will leave it there and leave extra time for questions now.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Okay.
Hello, good evening. Firstly, I just echo what's already been said for thanking for organising this evening, especially on such a beautiful night. I'm sure most of you would prefer to be in your back gardens, but this is such an important issue. So I'm Craig Miller, and I'm representing the Scottish Labour Party in the forthcoming EU elections. Now, these are elections none of us expected to be having. However, it is the inability and in the incompetence of Theresa May and her Tory government that has led us here. The inability to negotiate a good deal with the rest of the EU that would have the backing of both Parliament and the people of this country, result in us having to go to the polls on the 23rd of this month. Now, there is an alternative. The Labour Party has put forward an alternative, a customs union, single market, protection of workers' rights, which would result in no need for a hard border in Ireland. But you know, we could get weighed down on just that discussion. But this is about more than just who voted leave and who voted remain. This is about who we are as a country and what we stand for as people of this country. That's why I ask you all to reject in the strongest terms possible the ideology of hate and division being peddled by both the Brexit and UKIP parties and reject the far right. And instead, I hope that you'll give serious consideration to a party that is on the side of the many, not just a few. A party that does have a vision for this country. And I hope that you will vote Scottish Labour on Thursday, the 23rd of May. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sheila Ritchie and I'm the lead Liberal Democrat candidate in Scotland on the European elections next Thursday. There are two things, I think, that make the Liberal Democrats stand out. We've always consistently wanted to remain. No ifs, no buts, no maybes. The polls are clear that some people have changed their mind since 2016, and even people who voted leave now want to remain. We're also the only Remain party in Scotland which wants not only to stop Brexit, but to stop all the constitutional chaos. We want to break down barriers between people, not build them. We don't want borders between Scotland and England any more than we want borders between the UK and the EU. People, we are discovering every day on the doorsteps, are fed up of the shambles, the division and the damage that has already been done to our economy. The only way to stop it is for Remainers to vote Liberal Democrat. People in England did that in huge numbers in the local elections a week past Thursday, and it's our turn on the 23rd of May. We can stop Brexit. Only we are clear that we want Scotland in the UK and in the EU. The Liberal Democrats stand with the majority of the people of Scotland who voted for both of those things in 2 referendums. Instead of independence and Brexit, we want a country where we create more jobs, a safer country with more money for the NHS and European clout to fight the climate emergency. We can achieve that in Europe, in the strong Liberal alliance which runs across the European Union institutions. And back at home, we would do that by taking a federal approach and giving Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland more say on policies. This is a final chance for the public to reject a bad deal and not leave it to MPs. The people rejected the SNP's bad deal in 2014, and they would reject it again today if it were put, which is why it won't be put anytime soon. The Greens are sitting on the SNP's coattails, pro-independence, pro-more shambles. We need a public vote, and we need it quickly to settle the arguments and to stop Brexit once and for all. The Tories are pro-Brexit. Labour, not sure. SNP rejected a people's vote and then changed its mind. Great. But their main aim is always independence, and that won't stop the chaos. The Brexit Party, well, they're only for one thing. They want the right of rich people not to be accountable for tax. Change UK, it's a one-policy party with a visible crack through the middle and, like the Greens, a wee bit Billy No-Mates, having rejected our offers of friendship. Stop the chaos, stop the shambles, stop Brexit with a Liberal Democrat vote next week.
Can you hear me? Oh, goodness. Good evening. My name is Jim Ferguson. I'm a Highlander from Inverness, and I have to say, what a beautiful city you've got. I'm very graciously taken next door to see the wonderful church there, and it was fascinating. I'm from a business background. I've been in business for 25 years, and I've served with Crime Stoppers for the last 11 years. And for the last 2 years, I've been running Scottish Crime Stoppers as the Scottish chairman of Crime Stoppers here in Scotland. So working with the police, working with intelligence agencies, working with communities to engender goodwill, policing by consent and trust. I must say, though, I was a little bit surprised to hear what we were standing for from our colleague at the Liberal Democrats. That was a new one. I would just like to say in reply to that the bright orange signs that they're now using matched Vince Cable's face when he heard that one of his core organisers had just joined the Brexit Party. So look, what do we stand for? Well, I stand for honesty, truth, compassion. I've heard my colleague here in the Labour camp say that Brexit's all about division and extremism or far right. I'm more centrist than probably half of you here. I'm a little bit on the right, but I believe in doing things the right way. And I'll tell you something that's quite incredible. And I honestly never thought I would ever be sharing a platform with anybody who had been a member of the Communist Party. But here we are, Claire Fox, Communist Party. You all know who George Galloway is, don't you? Ex-Labour politician. But listen, he's a very good speaker. And he talks a lot of sense. George Galloway, formerly of Labour, respect, has just said in reply to some of the Labour people who were talking about extremism and how Nigel Farage was just a racist, he can tell you that his wife is coloured, of mixed race, and his children are of mixed race, and he knows Nigel Farage and has many debates with him, and he has said, Nigel Farage is a populist, but he isn't a racist. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, neither am I. My wife is half Indian, my children are mixed race. How dare anybody suggest that we are against people of colour or different backgrounds or cultures? If you look at the quality of the candidates of the Brexit Party, you will see men and women who are ordinary people. They've come from ordinary backgrounds. None of us are career politicians. But change is coming. I was on the BBC debate night last Sunday. One of the first questions from the audience was, what's going to happen in the election? And I said, there are two things that's probably going to happen in this election. First, we are going to have what's called potentially an electoral landslide victory. And the other thing that we're going to see is we're going to see an electoral wipeout. But I will say this. I do feel for the thousands, well over 1,300 Conservative men and women, councillors, who fought hard in the local elections in England and Wales and who lost their seats. I genuinely feel sorry for them because they're good people. They've got caught up in the carnage, and there are good peoples on both sides of the House of Parliament as well, people who might have voted to remain, but who place democracy higher up on their list of priority, and I salute them for it. But something phenomenal is happening in the Brexit Party. People from both sides are coming together because this is no longer a question of left and right. It's about right and wrong. And we're standing up together, people from the Labour, people from the Conservatives, and everybody in between, for democracy. And for Lord Adonis, the Labour peer, to condemn 5 million Labour voters to say, if you voted to leave, he doesn't want you in the party. So I say to you, you are welcome here with us. Join us, march with us, and together we can change politics for good.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for organising this evening and to you all for coming out on such a lovely evening. My name is Maggie Chapman and I am the lead candidate for the Scottish Greens in next week's European elections. These elections are probably the most important European elections we've had. Firstly, we're actually talking about Europe, which makes a change for once. And the Scottish Greens are standing with 3 key priorities. Firstly, we want to make a very, very clear statement that a vote for the Greens is a vote to stop Brexit. Scotland voted overwhelmingly nearly 3 years ago to remain part of the European Union, and our voices have been completely and utterly ignored in the last 3 years of negotiations. So we want to remain, and not because we think the European Union is perfect. There needs to be quite a lot of work done to it, so we want to remain and rebel. We have to reform the European Union to reinforce its democratic principles and to change it so it works better for all of us. But we also want to remain because that is one of the clearest ways we can protect our public services. We know that Theresa May has already said that she's prepared to sell off the NHS as part of trade deals with North America. That's unacceptable. Secondly, we want to use this election to make sure we have the strongest possible voice in Europe to tackle climate breakdown. Our plan, and our plan that is shared with Green parties across the continent, is that of a Green New Deal. And this New Deal will see a transformation of our economy. It'll see investment in the technologies and industries of the future to create new jobs, good, well-paid jobs. It will create warm homes, and it will create clean air, things that are good for all of us. It is no longer good enough for us just to tinker around the economy that is broken. We need a complete shift in that. And our final key priority is to make hope possible. As I said, as I've said before, the job of the radical is to give people that hope, to make that hope possible. Not only for global action on climate change, but to stand up for freedom of movement, to stand up for the principles on which the European Union was founded, that people, wherever they were born, were welcome. And that is what the Greens are standing for. For a just and welcoming Scotland, please vote Green next Thursday. Thank you very much.
So our last speaker is Peter Griffiths.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm from Port Lamont in Argyll, and it's always a great pleasure to actually come across here to the mainland. We do need our supplies from time to time, but it's absolutely wonderful that we're able to fill the hall as well, because it's well worth coming out and talking to you. So thank you very much for coming and listening to the different candidates. Very helpful. Change UK. Who are they? New kids on the block. 4 weeks ago, we didn't exist. We had 11 rebel MPs in the House of Commons who formed themselves into the independent group. And the independent group was then created into a party 4 weeks ago, and they created the opportunity for people to apply from all walks of life, mainly who have never stood for political office before, to be able to become MEP candidates in these elections. Why? Because we believe that the Brexit process has broken our political mechanisms. It has polarised the community to the far left and far right, with a few people in between, and most importantly, that it has created stagnation not only in our business infrastructures and our support mechanisms, but it's made it so difficult to be able to move forward on any issue that Brexit is the overriding issue. If we don't solve that issue, we cannot work on climate change and social infrastructure, transport, and the means that are there. So where do I come from? What's my background? That's really important to understand. I was the former Director General Civil Aviation for the United Kingdom. I ran the civil aviation infrastructure for this country and represented all of you in very large forums, not only in the EU, but also on behalf of the EU on the international stage with the United Nations through ICAO. We were leading lights in bringing in changes in climate change for aviation. After that, I served with the European Commission for 6 years as the chairman of the performance review body for single European skies, overseeing 31 countries' contribution to the air traffic control structures that you use to go on your holidays and move people for business and freight. Really important infrastructures that have to be dealt with at a transnational level. They cannot be dealt with at a local level because global interaction requires it. My colleagues, all of my 70 colleagues that sit in Change UK at the moment, all come from similar backgrounds. All of our candidates standing here in Scotland have got a background on something. We have Kate Foreman, who is a GP in Selkirk. We have a research clinician who works at the Royal Free Hospital down in London, but lives up here in Scotland. We have people from all walks of life, all representing our issues, saying one thing: Brexit has broken our politics. We need a change. We need a people's vote, and we need it as soon as possible. It can no longer allow us to stagnate. Thank you.
Oh, thank you all to our candidates and speaker. To set the scene for tonight, I've been given various envelopes with questions in them. The themes that have emerged for tonight are not in any particular order: workers' rights, the withdrawal agreement, people's vote, funds for regions, agriculture and fishing, climate change, environmental issues, freedom of movement and the single market, and the one that has most questions under other issues. So we'll see if we get to other issues. But perhaps to kick off, we'll take the question which is perhaps explains why we're here tonight. And this is from Leslie Sinclair, asking, why are all the main parties not keeping their election promises to leave the European Union? So, Neil, would you like to take that question first?
I suppose my party is in power, so I suppose I say, I suppose the point I would raise here is that the Conservatives have been trying to get a deal to leave the European Union. Our election promises in the UK were to honour the result of the referendum. Locally here in Stirling, it was clear when people elected a Conservative MP, it was saying, we're going to leave the European Union, make the best of Brexit, and that is the mandate that he's working to. The thing here is that there are too many people who are playing politics with this. Whether it's the SNP who are using this issue to advance their independence cause, or whether it's the Labour Party doing whatever it is that the Labour Party is up to, or whether it is the Liberal Democrats to try and make themselves relevant again, or indeed the other parties who have advanced themselves forward at this stage. These are political games being played with the future of this country, and I think it is absolutely shameful. And I do not limit that only to people in other parties. There are people in my own party who are frankly playing games with this process. And the sooner we can rally behind the Prime Minister and actually get a deal which allows us to leave the European Union smoothly, the better.
Yeah, so I think obviously Brexit has been such a difficult decision for the country. Do you know, it was such a close decision. Firstly, as a referendum, I believe we should never have had in the first place. It was to appease the Tory backbenches. And now we're in a place where the public wanted to send, I believe, what they class as a political elite a message, and they have. Do you know? So certainly the election, no one won an outright majority. Therefore, it was right that the parties should come together and try to find some, I know there is no such thing as a good Brexit, but some Brexit that would perhaps have the support of both the Parliament and the country. But the Tories didn't do that. They didn't reach out. They didn't reach out to their own party. Do you know, they shoved themselves in a room. Firstly, Theresa May wouldn't even speak to her own cabinet. Her cabinet then resigned. But when we look across the political spectrum, yes, there is division within the Labour Party. There is going to be division within the Labour Party because there are many Labour MPs who represent very Leave areas. But all the political parties have division, no more than the Tories, but the SNP equally as well. Do you know, you said that it is unanimous. Well, that's not the case. Pete Wishart abstained. You had 4 abstentions on the People's Vote twice. I think that's worth remembering, that actually the People's Vote has come up twice in Parliament and has been rejected. People are terrified that their preferred option, if they support something else, then that's wiped out. Actually, we need to get together and we need to talk this through, and we need to talk it through sensibly, quickly, because people are suffering. Companies are leaving already. We're losing jobs. Do you know, for example, I'll be quick, I can see you looking at me. The employment figures today are out, and it's the best employment figures for X amount of years. But we're not taking into account those who are working 0-hour contracts, those who might only work a couple of hours a month, those who do not have the employment that we have to, and we have companies who are now relocating elsewhere. It's time that everyone got on with it, and if resolving that means that we have to go back to the people and a people's vote, then so be it. However, only go back to the people, and this is the same for independence, if you're sure you're going to win. And at the moment, I don't think anyone can be sure that Remain is going to win, even though I was utterly gutted with the original outcome. I think unless we're absolutely certain, we shouldn't put it back to the people.
Thanks. I'm always struck, and I've done a few of these in my time, I'm always struck when people are desperate to talk about other people's parties than their own. The SNP has a clear Remain stance. Our proposition has always been that Scotland's best future is to remain within the EU. And if we're using evidence of guddling about with a few meaningless votes in the House of Commons as some sort of split, I was out campaigning with Pete Wishart last weekend, and we are very clearly united that Scotland's best future is within the EU. The UK's best future is within the EU as well. And this is where I feel for some of the Conservatives, the Scottish Conservatives in particular, in that the Scottish Conservatives, see how this government has been absolutely in the hock of the DUP because of Mrs May's snap election. The Scottish Conservatives could have had real influence over this. The Scottish Government has put forward various compromise proposals that, well, okay, there was an abstract question on the ballot paper, but Brexit could look like Norway, remaining within the single market and the customs union. It was rejected out of hand by a government that is so busy trying to negotiate with itself, it daren't speak to anybody else. And it's not just us, it's Wales as well. And most important than anything, it's Northern Ireland. And the situation in Northern Ireland is really serious, far too serious for the games that are being played with this down in Westminster. It is systemic failure. Now, I don't think Westminster is working well for the UK, but Scotland, we have a different choice. And the idea that we're using this as a pretext to go for independence, we reserve our right to do what's best for Scotland. But we also have a duty to try and solve this for our closest friends and neighbours. I don't want to see people in the UK, I don't want to see people in Northern Ireland have a bad time either. So we will leave no effort unspent to try and turn this round. And this is where I really wish the other parties would get their own acts together and then worry about the rest of us. But to answer Leslie's question about why the Remain parties aren't honouring our promises, we made no promise to leave. The SNP wants to remain within the EU.
Yeah, I'm trained as a lawyer, and people ask me a question, I have a tendency to answer it, as Alan just did. I made no election promise to leave the United Kingdom. My party made no election promise to leave the United Kingdom. My party has been unashamedly pro-EU. What did I say? UK. Same thing.
She didn't, to be fair.
And do you know what else? It's not the first time I've done that, and the last time was on television. However, my party has been unashamedly pro-EU ever since the idea was a concept. The reason we're in this mess is because, to give the SNP its due, when we voted in 2014, they presented us with a book that thick, which was a blueprint for independence. What did we get from the Leave campaigners? Paint on the side of a bus. And the options are pretty limited. The options are pretty wide. They are many and varied. Let's just take the four main ones. Customs Union, Single Market, No Deal, and Mrs May's Withdrawal Agreement. They're not the same. You can't actually say that any one of them meets the aspirations of the 17 million people who voted Leave. You have to identify what it is. We can't take back, you politicians can't take back a referendum vote, but you have to make it clear to the people that that's what they get if they vote Leave, and that's what they get if they vote Remain. That one's pretty obvious. So it has to go back to the people. That's the only way we're going to get out of the current shambles, and it's the only way we're going to stop Brexit.
Well, you know what's at stake here, don't you? Don't you? Democracy. democracy. When I was asked to come here tonight, I looked at the name on the list and it was Stirling for Europe. So I knew I would be in the minority here, but that's all right. The people of Stirling are very nice people. And I've been still made to feel very welcome. Alan Smith talks about the other parties needing to get their act together. We have. You just need to look at the polls. You need to understand what drives us and what motivates us to do what we're doing. We are now number 2 in Scotland, just behind the SNP on 21%, YouGov poll latest. Do not underestimate us. And by the way, I would say to Alan in particular, he tells you about independence. But what he forgets is that at the last election, there were 1 million people in Scotland that voted to leave the EU, far more than voted for the Scottish National Party. But here's the real thing. It's true. You don't have to take my word for it. You can go and Google it. Here's the real thing. Here's what we need to focus on. Because there's been an awful lot of fear and a lot of scaremongering going on. I've never yet met a Leave voter that said they didn't know what they were voting for. There wasn't a vote to do a deal. It wasn't about, are we going to do A, B, C, D, E, or F? It was, do you want to remain as part of the EU or do you want to leave? We voted to leave. We've already had the people's vote. But here's what's happening. You've got the nationalists, the Scottish nationalists in Scotland, who are always complaining about Westminster. And to be honest with you, the Scottish nationalists, I can understand why they get irritated with the two-party system in Westminster, because it doesn't work. What you're witnessing is the crumbling and disintegration of the old order. When my opening remarks were you two were two things that were going to happen. Either a landslide victory or an electoral wipeout. And I'll bring you back to 1993, when the Canadian Conservatives lost 200 MPs. Overnight, we're left with 2. And I do believe, with respect to my colleagues up here, I'm not going to pick on anybody, because I don't do that, but we are looking at the Conservative Party possibly ceasing to exist at all. The Brexit Party is rising because we want to have the democratic voice of the people enacted. And you might wonder about that. You might not agree with the Remain or the Brexit side of the argument. But what you must never, ever forget is that this is about democracy. If we don't see this vote enacted, any future referendum or election that you vote in could be overturned if the political class don't like the way you voted. And believe it or not, when I was in London just about a week or 2 ago, I met a Brexiteer candidate with the Brexit Party standing in this European election. And we got talking and he said, I was a Remainer. And I said, you've got to be joking, what are you doing here? He said, no, Jim, it's not about that. He said, I place democracy higher. I'm disappointed that we didn't get the vote our way, but when I've seen what's happened with politicians on both sides of the House not honouring the will of the people, he said I had to do something. And at least with us, you know what you've got. We're consistent in our message. We are the only party in Scotland advocating to leave. Everybody else here is for Remain. So I put it to you, what do you value most? Your future votes? Your referendums? Or are you going to simply let that slip away? And what we are looking at is not a deal. Mrs. May did not have a deal. She had a European treaty prepared for her, written by Barnier, with Angela Merkel looking over his shoulder when it was being written, and they simply handed it to Mrs. May to ratify and sign off. It's not a deal. It's not a deal. It's a European treaty. Even if Verhofstadt, Juncker, Tusk, they go about with a leather-bound copy of it, and it says on it, it's the European treaty. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's what it is. And it's not fit for purpose. And that's why she can't get it ratified. Because there's not enough people who are going to buy into that nonsense. Now, I don't know where this is going to lead in terms of the Prime Minister. I admire people who have bravery to come here and face a very difficult situation. But, nevertheless, what we're about to witness is seismic in its scale. And do not underestimate what other people across this nation are saying. and the Scottish National Party that offer independence as part of the European Union is a fallacy.
Excellent. What's wrong with democracy where we ask the people of the countries concerned, Scotland, the United Kingdom, Wales, the simple question of, do you want a people's vote? A people's vote is democracy in its own right, and there are three things that need to be resolved. The first is the original referendum. Do not rerun that. We're not asking that question again. We're giving you the three simple choices. There is the first one where you take the deal that's on the table. You've just heard about that particular deal. I'm pretty sure that having worked at the European Union, I'm going to agree with my colleague on the end here. The second aspect of it is there is a no-deal Brexit, a catastrophic Brexit, because I've worked in these structures that have got to be unpicked. It's really difficult to undo them. In 2008, my colleagues in the Labour government went to the House with the Treaty of Lisbon. It was ratified overwhelmingly. It carried over 45 key policy areas to the oversight of the transnational structure, absolutely essential to the running of the EU. That's where Single European Skies came from. If you want to unpick those mechanisms, it takes a long time to do it. It will not be done overnight. And during that time, businesses will leave, there will be further stagnation, and there will be further problems with the UK economy. There certainly won't be 350 million a week going to the National Health Service. So, and the last one, as you've heard from my colleague on the far end, there was a lot of work done on ensuring that there is one final option, which is to revoke Article 50. That is the choices that the people of this country, Scotland, actually should make their view on. It is the people's vote that is essential. That is true democracy.
Thank you. To go back to the question, why am I not honouring what our party said we would do by honouring the referendum result? Well, the Scottish Greens never did. We didn't want a referendum. We didn't say at any point that we wanted to leave the European Union. And we are the Scottish Green Party. Scotland voted to remain. We are honouring that vote. And we know that in the last 3 years, Scotland, as I've said before, Scotland's voice has not only been ignored, but we have heard conservative people say that they are prepared to roll back devolution by changing the way money is spent in Scotland on devolved issues. The UK government has no respect for Scotland and no respect for devolution, and that, quite frankly, is unacceptable. What is also unacceptable is that the party of government who gave us that referendum in 2016 had no plan. That is one of the worst actions any government should do, to go into a referendum like that with absolutely no plan for any way out. And we were sold a false prospectus. We know the Leave campaign broke electoral law. We know that. We have judicial ruling on that. And because the referendum was advisory, it cannot be challenged. So that leaves, you know, if this were a normal election, it would have been thrown out. So the only possible democratic way out of this is to put it back to the people for a people's vote, and to say very loudly and clearly that Scotland in 2016 voted to remain, and I know that Scotland will again, if we're given the opportunity, vote remain. I just want to say two quick points, just to pick up on two things two of the previous speakers have said. Firstly, I think, Sheila, you said that the Lib Dems had always been never been in favour of a referendum. Well, Nick Clegg voted for it in 2008, February 2008. And actually, your party leader, Jim, said that Nigel Farage said he wanted a second referendum if the result went the wrong way for him. So there is very, very clear precedent across the board of people saying, actually, let's put this back to the people, let's get a democratic mandate, and let's honour Scotland's vote to remain.
Well, thank you for your answers to the first question. I'm conscious we're halfway through the evening and we've only asked one question, so I'll go straight on to our second question, which I think is very topical, and because some of the candidates mentioned this in their opening speeches, and that is, what is your policy on the urgent question of climate change, and what will you do in Brussels, if elected, to keep the centre stage on behalf of your, to keep this centre stage on behalf of your constituents?
Thanks. As the party who's the only party up here that's had a very, very clear and consistent message on climate change, I'm very happy to take this first. But I'll try and be brief because, as you can imagine, I could probably talk about this for quite a long time. As I said in my opening remarks, Greens across the continent are in favour of a Green New Deal. And we will use that not only to restructure our economy, because we know it's actually the economy and our economic system that has got us into this mess. It's our economy that has led to us killing the planet. We want that Green New Deal to see investment in renewable energies, investment in alternative industries that will not only tackle climate change, but will give people well-paid jobs. We've seen in the northeast of Scotland over the last 4 years, over 50,000 jobs being lost from the oil and gas sector. It is not a sustainable industry any longer. We have to transition. We have to implement what we've always talked about as a just transition away from an economic system and an energy system that is killing the earth. One of our very, very clear policies in our manifesto is to campaign for free public transport across the continent. We know that where this has been enacted, it has not only reduced carbon emissions and other climate changing emissions, but it has resulted in cleaner air. So people suffer less from cardio and respiratory problems. They suffer less from asthma and other issues like that. So it is good public money spent in preventative ways to prevent health conditions that we don't need to be having. None of these conditions are absolutely necessary. It's because of the pollution in our air that so many cardiovascular problems arise. So through our Green New Deal, we transform our economy, we change the way in which our industries work, we change the way in which our communities and societies work, and we give people the opportunity to do the things that we as humans are good at, to focus on things like caring for each other, on being creative, and on working together, on cooperating with each other. Because those are the things that we as humans are good at. And if with a different kind of economy, underlined by a different kind of energy system, that is what we can do. And that's what not only the Scottish Greens, but Greens across the continent are standing to deliver.
I live in the country and I love the countryside. One of the questions I was asked there the other day was, could we not have cycle tracks all over the country? I think it's a fantastic idea. I go cycling all the time. One of the best forms of exercise you can get. And they said, well, how would you pay for it? I said, well, we've got £39 billion just sitting there waiting to be spent. It didn't go down very well with the Greens. I was campaigning in Inverness a few weeks ago, and they said, did you see what was on their table? And I went and had a look. And there was a leaflet from the Green Party. It said, hope, not hate. And in the corner it said hope. There was a bar going across, it said hope in it, and had lovely pictures of flowers and fields and people canvassing. And then it said, hope, not hate. Do you want to know what was on the hate part? No, it wasn't me. That would have been worse. It was Nigel Farage, poor Nigel, and he was done in purple. Really? Look, we've got new tech. Our party. Yeah, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Or are you shouting at me for a reason?
Yes. What is your party's policy on the question?
Well, we don't have any party policy because we are standing for the European Union. Yeah, I make no bones about it. We got formed on the 12th of April. 4 weeks ago. And Nigel Farage has made it very clear, we're not going to put any policies out there. We're focusing on the European election. But let me tell you, folks, you'll be glad to know we're getting ready, and we're coming after Westminster next. You better believe it. And we're going to have policies, all right. Oh, no. Because when it comes to climate change, though, there's a very serious point to this. Because in terms of the damage that's been done to ecology, when you see the trawling methods that are being used by Spanish fleets, French fleets coming in, destroying our mussel beds, our fish stocks, this may well be a question that comes later on in terms of our fishing industry. I'll tell you exactly why he doesn't. Because as legislators, the European Parliament... Are you going to let me answer, or do you want to shout me down? The European Parliament is the only parliament filled with legislators in the world that can't pass laws. Do you want to know why? Because the European Commission won't let them. It's completely undemocratic. And that's why people like I don't want to be part of the European Union. We want to make our own laws. We want to decide our own trade deals. We want to have our own policies.
All right, thank you. Going back to the question, the focus in the European Parliament, in the European institutions, has to be on renewables. We've done a lot of damage, by which I mean the British government, to the policies that were already in place supporting renewables, solar power, wind power, principally through the actions of the Conservative government in this country. That's an area that we have to go back and focus on. We can't deal with climate change in a micro fashion. I do my best. I don't use plastics. I do as much as I possibly can by public transport. I've been a conservationist all my adult life. But we can't change the enormous destruction that the climate emergency is causing simply on a one-by-one basis. We have to operate on a global scale. The European Union was the first body to set standards. We led the way, by we, I mean the European Union, led the way in climate targets. They have to be built into everything. They have to be built into the policies of the European Union, United Kingdom, and of Scotland. Liberal Democrats were the first party to adopt a zero-carbon strategy and policy. I actually think that it's not tough enough, ours or the European Union's. I would want to see zero-carbon targets brought closer. I realise that is challenging, but I think we have to do it. We're opposed to fracking. We're in favour of natural policies like reforestation in order to deal with the problems of the climate emergency. And in Europe, through the Alliance for Liberal Democrats in Europe, I would be doing everything I possibly could to achieve all of those things.
Excellent. I just want to write a reply on this. What do the MEPs do? We have an MEP here, and I'm pretty sure that he'll help us out as well. But what these MEPs do is they do the primary legislation which is required. The European Commission does the implementing rules. It has absolutely no influence whatsoever over the 750 MEPs who sit there and negotiate what is right on a transnational level. It's an extremely good body, it's very efficient, and it brings in transnational structures which affect us on a daily basis by making sure that everybody is operating from the same hymn sheet. And this is the #1 issue that we need to deal with. Green issues are affecting us on a daily basis. There is no doubt about that. So what will Change UK be advocating within the European Parliament? Well, first of all, we want to be able to achieve carbon net zero by 2050 with a stretch target for 2045. We think that we need to accelerate all of the activity on removing diesel and petrol vehicles and taking carbon out of our transportation systems. We need to be looking at all of the larger international bodies. You just heard from my Liberal Democrat colleague about the very big voice that Europe can have. I've used that voice to bring in emissions trading within the aviation sector. When you're speaking with 500 million people behind you, America, Brazil, Russia, India and China all have to listen, and they have to listen very loudly. So those things are important that we maintain them. It is only the European Union that has the ability to deliver that, because without that voice, we are nothing. The final issue is making sure that we keep some of the many attractive places here and protecting our nature. I have the privilege of living right next door to Loch Lomond National Park. I would not like to see that go. It's a national heritage for Scotland, but most importantly, it's a national heritage for the world. It's full of the finest trees that you can find. So Scotland is a very good example of it. It's essential that we have it. Whether you cycle round it or you walk round it, matters not, but you do need to keep it.
It's an interesting question, because for me, well, I'm not planning on being a European parliamentarian, and without meaning to be, I'm not meaning this in a nasty way. I hope that none of the people on the panel tonight take their seats in the European Parliament, and I would say the same thing if I was sitting here with the Conservative members of the European Parliament candidates as well. The thing here is that if we can leave with a deal within the next month or so, then nobody needs to take their seats up. We do not need to pay MEPs the costs, and we do not have to take part in that Parliament. In terms of the climate change issue, the question was, what would we do at the European parliamentary level on climate change? I'm answering the question in the context of, I do not think you need the European Parliament, I do not think you need the European Union, I do not think you need any of that to actually deal with climate change. The United Kingdom has a fantastic history of dealing with climate change. We have the lowest, at the moment we have the lowest carbon emissions in the UK since 1888. The carbon emissions are going down. We have a significant focus on air quality. We are seeing improvements in the fight, we're seeing improvements in a renewed focus on the fight to reduce plastic pollution. If we want to talk about energy, I used to work in the renewable energy sector. The United Kingdom has one of the highest capacities of renewable energy in Europe. And that is principally as a result of years of government focus on this. We need low carbon energy. We need to ensure that that is done. And Maggie made a actually really useful point, I think, because actually there is a huge industry here of environmental companies and carbon reduction in the economy, which can lead to high impact jobs. These can be very high quality jobs. And I think there is a new green economy out there, and things like the Green Investment Bank, things like the investments that we've seen into the reduction in fossil fuels. The UK has been several months without coal. Things like carbon capture and storage. All of these things are fantastic ways of generating significant economic output as well as reducing carbon. But what would I do at the European Parliament level? I would hope that we don't have MEPs, and that is the bottom line.
So climate change is a national emergency. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. And do you know, we were heading in the right direction at one point. Then President Trump got elected, pulled out of the Paris Agreement. And I tell you, if it's a race to the bottom, then it's going to be a very dangerous race that will result in millions of people dying prematurely. So climate change could not be more important on any agenda. It should be on the top priority for everyone, whether we're in Europe or not. That's why I think it was so important that the Labour Party did table a motion a couple of weeks ago, supported by other parties, for a climate emergency in this country. But one way we can tackle climate change in the European Union is through trade. With who we trade with, we can make sure that we put in place the necessary procedures and policies to make sure we only trade with people who are willing to follow sensible